This book is not only a classic in terms of its impact on how people actually started to view ancient religions and mythology, but also because it has influenced our notions of astrology to this day. Most people love speculating on the origins of religious beliefs without being aware that most of those theories actually stem from this work, and obviously other works around the same time and around the same general premise. So if you want to get some of the basics involved in this work, stellar religions, astrological speculations on myth, stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Doing all these things really helps the channel out. I'll also put below my X account so you can contact me directly if you wish. And also on the side, I'll put my Ko-Fi account where you can donate a singular amount or a recurring amount. You can also check out my merch store if you want to promote the channel. I greatly appreciate those that already do these things and those that would want to do those things. And again, for the algorithm to promote channels like ours here, where we speak about books and philosophical topics instead of pure brainless entertainment, which is what you see mostly on YouTube, then sharing it and liking it and doing these things really helps out it, and I appreciate it. In this episode, I'm going over Hamlet's Mill by Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Dechend. It is published by Nonpareil Books from 2020. Any edition you can find, it'll be good enough. This is basically a reprint, but it's a classic work. Now, this book posits the theory that all ancient religions and myths are primarily founded on astronomical preoccupations and a deep exploration of how heavenly movements influence human beings, which is basically astrology. So, to reduce it even further, it's based on the notion that all myths and all religions at the end of it all stem from a stellar foundation at the core. The notion that the first mystics were a type of scientists, basically. It's obviously fascinating because it can be used to simplify and explain in a very creative way how ancient cultures functioned. It is also a very creative way of approaching ancient religion than just saying they were superstitious primitives, which is what usually modern people do. So I want to give a quote about Newton in particular that I think exemplifies the point of the proto-scientist theory of ancient shamans. And this is right in the introduction. Quote, "Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians, the last of the Babylonians and Sumerians, the last great mind which looked out on the visible and intellectual world with the same eyes as those who began to build our intellectual world rather less than 10,000 years ago. Why do I call him a magician? Because he looked on the whole universe and all that is in it as a riddle, as a secret which could be read by applying pure thought to a certain evidence, certain mystic clues which God had laid about the world to allow a sort of philosopher's treasure hunt to the Esoteric Brotherhood." So you see, that's the core idea in this book, that the ancient philosophers, the ancient theologians, the ancient witch doctors were at the end of the day a proto-Newton, a proto-scientist who observed the movement of heavenly lights and decided to construct from it an understanding of existence in the universe itself. Here's another quote that I think helps exemplify this again. "All that is living reality, sub species transeuntis, has a tale, as it appears in awesome or appalling or comforting aspects, in the fearful symmetry of tigers or theorems, or stars in their courses, but always alive to the soul. It is a play of transmutations which include us, ruled by time, framed in the eternal forms. A thought ruled by time can be expressed only in myth. When mythical languages were universal and self-explanatory, thought was also self-sufficient. It could seek no explanation of itself in other terms, for it was reality expressed as living. And that obviously is a very poetic way of looking at this. And that's what makes the book really special. It's that it's actually approaching ancient culture and the stellar impact on religion, which is very true. If you didn't have a lot of cities around you, if you were in the countryside and you stepped outside at night and you looked up, it's a very impactful experience. It will change your notions of existence. Imagine that way in the past where you had more access to visually appreciate the starry heavens. And also the reality that these amazing people also were able to track the movements, make sense of them, and they were very accurate in these calculations. So the book's main thesis is that myth is primarily cosmological and is not really historical. And so the attempt here is to point to the heavens to explain most myth and disregard historicity as being of any importance. Now, of course, I would say that historicity of certain myths is important to the myth itself. And that's something that if you ignore, it can also distort the reality of myth. But of course, any book that presents a theory, usually a unifying theory of any topic, is going to have that tendency to oversimplify or to reduce everything to one single aspect, which is fine, but it's good to be aware that there are other possibilities as well. But doubtless, this book is spectacular to explore the precession of the equinoxes, which is the basis of the entire work, and the real impact on how ancients understood reality and the divine in the context of this precession is a very important piece of the puzzle. And a lot of people ignore it, and this book was revolutionary in that sense. The cool thing about the book also is that it criticizes the evolutionary progressivist mindset. And obviously I mean this in the Darwinian sense. It mocks presentism and accuses it basically of ignoring the fact that many of those so-called barbarians of the past were quite sophisticated when it comes to astronomy, astrology, and science in general. And any book that does this, I appreciate, because I think the progressivist evolutionary presupposition is highly destructive, and I would say one of the reasons why society is the way it is, because people keep assuming that everything is somehow becoming better, more advanced, etc., and they keep forgetting that people are getting dumbed down, they're becoming less functional, etc. In other words, they get blinded to the fact that there's an ebb and flow to reality, that some societies could be going down, some could be going up. Certain historical moments were worse than now, and some were better than now. That there's a natural flow to existence, that it's not just pure linear progression. And most people that think that way tend to be utopians, and as you can imagine, they would be quite destructive in their attempts to make everything fit into their little axiomatic bubble. I love the fact that this book discusses how Krishna, as one of the avatars of Vishnu, in the context of how the book presents it, is at the threshold of Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga, and thus functioning as a god in time, as part of a clock of sorts that steps into time to work a process. And the authors argue that these stories preserve an ancient conception of time and interaction with how time flows in and out with our existence. So that contrast of time engagement and the historical transformation of a stellar time to narratives in human history has been around for a while, but it's rare to see, again, a good integration, or at least a fair amount of knowledge of the Mahabharata and a lot of these ancient works from the East that should be better known in the West just because of its knowledge, at least. And the fact that the authors identify that the conception of the avatars is in tune with an ancient mentality is very cool, and I appreciated that. The problem of evil is also discussed along with a beautifully clean cosmological presentation that resembles a perennialist platter, placing many of the gods into different roles and taking a lot of different world religions and kind of organizing their myths and their narratives into a very clean astrological drama. And of course, that tends to be very valuable for someone because that is actually their theory. So being able to explain a lot of these different myths in the stellar cosmological structure that they believe is correct helps the book's argument. So even for those that like myth and like studying different religions, it's masterful the way they crossed reference between Nordic cosmology and then Vedic counterparts and then an occasional Asian reference, Middle Eastern and indigenous mentions from South America, North America, turning the work into a highly educational experience and enjoyable, at least for me, because I love the topic. But as you can tell, this book is the classic one that kind of connects all the dots. And of course, this connecting the dots thing is very popular these days, although it does stretch the truth a bit, albeit making the study of myth edifying, but it does suffer from the possible consequence that people will trivialize or simplify the myths themselves as a function of something else instead of studying them for what they are by themselves. And also there's a danger that fallaciously people would think that just a similarity implies a connection, historical, cultural, or even that it's describing an objective truth. Just because someone is mentioning the same thing in a different way or something that seems to be the same way doesn't mean that it is. So one has to be a lot more critical when they study myth than people think. But nonetheless, it is a very clean, smooth way of approaching the topic. There's a quote in here that I really like that addresses kind of the end of the world and also the flat earth in a very interesting way. I want to quote that. Quote, "The mythical earth is in fact a plane, but this plane is not our earth at all, neither our globe, nor a presupposed homocentrical earth. Earth is the implied plane through the 4 points of the year marked by the equinoxes and solstices, in other words, the ecliptic. And this is why this earth is very frequently said to be quadrangular. The 4 corners, that is, the zodiacal constellations, rising heliacally at both the equinoxes and solstices, every world age has its own earth. It is for this reason that ends of the world are said to take place. A new earth arises when another set of zodiacal constellations brought in by the precession determines the year points." So this notion of the conceptual earth, the mythical earth, being superimposed into the real one, it's just interesting, obviously. So this book is so packed with important information, I could really spend hours talking about it. So it is obviously better for you folks to just get the book and study it. But to simplify, this work presents the notion that time is the key factor in our spirituality, and our relationship with space is the backdrop. The measuring, counting, framing, all of that attempt to understand existence within this highly complex math of being is the key to understand all of our mythographies, philosophies, etc. And although this can carry the very real danger of being radical simplification of this wonderfully vast universe, and can also remove the true depth of theology, I can't deny that the language we utilize for these things always carries an astronomical tinge that is impossible to dismiss offhand. So there is no doubt that the stellar astronomical element to religion is important. and all religions have this in their system. But the question is it all there is? And I would argue no, but it's an important piece of the puzzle. So obviously, I highly recommend this book. I think it's a crucial study. It will give you so many important perspectives on religion and the true interaction of these things that, to be very straightforward, most people ignore. In particular, because Christianity, which has been very influential, just like Islam, has in a way departed from this visual, this connection to the stellar background of their systems. So by focusing more on the historicity of their text, focusing more on the theological, philosophical issues that stem from their system, they have departed from the cosmological, stellar backdrop that actually enriched their system from the very beginning. In other words, if you look before their systems began to take shape, their foundations are stellar. In many ways, it's not the only foundation, but it's one of them that should be acknowledged and studied further. That's all. So get the book, drop in the comments if you have any thoughts on this work, and please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. I really appreciate you folks doing this. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.